Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin. I'm a lifelong journalist. I've produced stories for Diane Sawyer at ABC News, Charles Kraus at CBS News, CNN, and a few other places along the way. And I love having fascinating conversations, meeting people who are passionate about ideas. And I also enjoy meeting great writers. And I have the opportunity to do that every week with this wonderful podcast series. And I'm talking, of course, about my dear friend, David Parker. David is joining us from San Francisco, and he is the author of two excellent books, Income and Wealth and A San Francisco Conservative. Hey, David, how are you today?
I'm fine. Tom, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Time we're
Good.
recording this is the beautiful fall season. I'm in Connecticut. I know people are a little deceived by the Golden Gate Bridge photo behind me, but I am in Connecticut, and life is good. So
I'm in Connecticut too.
Oh, I could have guessed that. I know.
Yeah, you can tell by the books.
That's right. Well, speaking of books, I thought, people have probably had a chance to listen to a few episodes by now. And I thought maybe we could sort of return to the fundamentals. Some of the earlier episodes that we recorded as we were kind of getting this whole series ready, we talked about some really basics and fundamentals, why you chose to title your books the way you do and so on. And I think this would be a great time to revisit those ideas. So first of all, why did you choose to title your current book or your newest book, A San Francisco Conservative? And is that the label that you, in fact, put on yourself?
That could be a label. I'm socially liberal. I'm from San Francisco, by the way. And politically, I'm liberal. No one should be denied the vote, regardless of wealth, regardless of social status. That's a Jeffersonian, we're a Jeffersonian democracy because he rammed that down our throats. That's great. And I'm conservative only on the economic area that says we shouldn't spend more than we take in taxes. And we're spending way, way, way more than we're taking in. And when politicians are running for office, including right now, they're saying, vote for me and I'll spend more money than my adversary will. And by borrowing. And that's not a good long run program. The US will not go downhill, but other countries certainly would, because we can just print more dollars, or we can actually cut back a little bit in some of our expenses if we have to, but we're on the wrong path. Yeah. Then I suppose I'm a conservative because if you look at what progressives have done, they've spent money, but not solved problems. One, because you can't solve problems with money, because this nation is awash in capital. And we have spent for the war on poverty approximately 23 trillion, which is 3 times what we spent for all the wars this nation ever fought. But some of those wars we won, or some of them we lost. But the war on poverty, nothing. We didn't win or lose it, nothing. The poverty was 15% in 1964, when Lyndon Johnson declares poverty to be unconscionable in a rich nation like us. And it's still 15% on average, some years lower, some years higher, but on average, it hasn't moved. So it's just money thrown out, and now it's all paid for by borrowing. And we threw money at the public schools, which were among the finest in the world. They're probably among the lowest in the world, because diminishing marginal utility. You can't solve problems with money. You can only make things worse. Yeah. One of the musicians in my band was in a Brooklyn barbershop, and someone says, we got to spend more money on the poor. And somebody stood up and says, if you can solve problems by spending money, you don't have a problem. That means that everybody is getting the message finally. Everybody is getting that message. Yeah. And that's one of my messages, that we shouldn't do that.
Yeah. You're a lifelong San Franciscan, and I'm just curious about what you've observed over the years and some of the themes that we like to talk about on these podcast episodes. I had the pleasure of being in the San Francisco area way back in 1968. My dad was going to Stanford University. He was part of a journalism graduate program for that year. So I was in second grade. I remember it was the summer of love. It was quite a time to be in San Francisco and be 7 years old. But over the years, we've seen sort of obviously the growth of Silicon Valley, the tech innovation, perhaps what America may be best at these days. But also, I know you have a homelessness problem there, and Governor of California was put up on recall vote because of the homelessness issue. I know that, again, when we talk about what does it mean to be a conservative or progressive or a liberal, sometimes that topic of compassion comes up. How do we care about the homeless? How do we care about those in need? And are we painting conservatives with a negative brush unfairly? But I was just curious what you've observed over the years there in San Francisco when it comes to themes like that.
Yeah, conservatives are painted unfairly. He says if you're not willing to throw a lot of money at the homeless, you're not compassionate. And conservative says we're compassionate. That's why we're not throwing money at the homeless, because we're just making them more dependent. We're not going to solve their problem, and they're not going to solve their problem. So stop doing that. That's the difference. Nothing to do with compassion. Someday, in fact, the left-right split in this nation, in my opinion, has to do with a literal interpretation of the Constitution or a progressive interpretation of the Constitution. We're moving forward from the Constitution, a one-page, simple, general document that says we're going to vote for our legislature, and the government has certain enumerated powers, and that's it. Everybody else is on their own. That was the basis of our success. And now we're solving problems by taxing and throwing money, and that doesn't solve problems. We should stop, and that's one of my themes. The founding fathers got it right. If you read the arguments for the Constitution in the Federalist Papers, they're great. It's one page document. If we can't live by the 10 Commandments, we're through.
Right. Good point. Before I have a sort of follow-up question for you, but before we go there, I just wanted to remind everyone that you are watching or listening to A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring me, Tom Martin, and especially my dear guest, David Parker, who is the author of Income and Wealth and A San Francisco Conservative, which is where we got the title for this series. And David, again, thinking of San Francisco, one issue that you're really in touch with there is immigration. That's a big kind of a hot button issue in America right now. And as people are voting and, say, build a wall or something like that, what have you observed over the years there in San Francisco when it comes to immigration?
The same thing as with the homeless. We have laws in this country that are simple. Enforce them. We need immigrants. So we kind of turn our head when they come across the border because they're employed right away. There's not a store window in San Francisco, and maybe in the nation, that doesn't have a sign, help wanted. So we need all those people, but why can't they apply like anybody else? They don't have a right just to walk in. And why can't we have we do have some what's called maquiladora, something like that. Plants, factories at the border, come there, do work, and then you take your time and get your papers in order and apply, and we'll let people in that way. 100,000 a year or something like that. We need all those people. And people who are willing to make that effort to come are almost always okay. We're a nation of people who fled their country. Anybody who has that kind of gumption, we want them. They're leaving their family, their friends, their religion, their culture, their childhood, culture, everything. They're leaving to come for a better chance for themselves and really a better chance for their children. Yeah. And then they get here and they realize, part of that reason is because we're a free country. That's what makes for some of that opportunity. They don't know that when they come. They're coming here to make some money and get a job, and we need them. But you can't just do what you want. The homeless just can't come to San Francisco and just lay down and die on the sidewalk. Everybody just walks over them. Somebody has to enforce the law and say, you go to a shelter on the outskirts of town or a shelter in the inskirts of town. But you can't do that. And if you don't go there, we'll put you there. But we'll give you the option to keep moving. Keep moving is a good approach. Go to the outskirts of town. I like to say that the hobos in the 30s and 40s at least had some integrity. They stayed at the outskirts of town. They didn't come in and just roast hot dogs right in front of somebody's house or in front of somebody's business. Had some integrity.
As far as how things have changed, I mean, maybe not with reference to that subject, but I know you've written about, the vision of the founding fathers and so on, and especially the writings of Alexis de Tocqueville, certain characteristics in the American spirit. Have those qualities held up, do you think? I mean, where do we stand now compared to 200 plus years ago?
They're probably deep inside us, but they've been pushed aside a little bit. De Tocqueville came here. The first thing he says, America, you fools, get rid of slavery. What are you doing? You're out of your mind. But after that, he said, this is the greatest country he's ever seen. All Americans should read Democracy in America. It makes you really proud. He says there's no country in the world where people are so responsible for themselves. When the government doesn't do a single thing, everybody's on their own. And he would go to the backwoods of Kentucky and Illinois, and people are sitting there in their log cabins reading the newspaper, discussing world events and local events, animated. He says, nowhere in the world are the farmers or the peasants sitting there with a newspaper discussing world events as if they're in a cafe in Paris. He says, this is over the top. You have the greatest nation in the world. This is really, and that's our tradition. Our tradition is very limited government. You're on your own. Americans wanted maximum individual freedom, and we got it. And we forgot that the other side of that coin is maximum individual responsibility. And de Tocqueville reminds us how great we are at that. Yeah. So that's what politicians should be saying. Let's bring back some responsibility, and let's cut most of the government programs that are making citizens dependent.
Yeah, no, good point. It's funny, can't resist throwing in, I guess it was probably in like the fall of 2020, a friend and I, we liked actually going out to the movie theaters because often we were the only two people in an entire theater because of COVID, and often lesser films were released. And one film that I remember seeing was starring Tom Hanks, where he played, again during pioneering days in America, a person who traveled from those small towns you described, reading the newspaper. There was that people wanted to know, and it was really pretty interesting because I hadn't even been aware that that was how life was way back when. It was very, very interesting. So are there other authors, and I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway, are there other authors who wrote long ago whose work really resonates today, just like Alexis de Tocqueville?
Well, one of my themes, and throughout all my writing, which I think makes my books a little bit interesting, is I give classical historical examples of the issues we're talking about today. And you realize, wait a second, these issues aren't new. I open up a San Francisco conservative with a quote from T.S. Eliot. Time past, time present, time future, it's the same. There's nothing new under the sun. And when you read Aristotle, you're just going to drop the book. You would say, who wrote this? When? He talks like we talk. His ideas are exactly what we're talking about, only so much better that I'm thinking, gee, everybody should be reading this chapter called Politics. One example is talks about property. He says it can be owned by the state, everything, and somehow it gets distributed by some corruption, I suppose, or kind of a halfway thing, where maybe you can you can have your own home, but maybe the state owns factories or some combination, a mixed economy, or you can just go completely free. Everything is private property. He says, let's go with the private property. Reason, diversity. His words, diversity. You don't want a monolithic culture. You want all kinds of people doing all kinds of things at all kinds of social status and all kinds of wealth. It's a far more creative way to live. Aristotle's words, much better than any arguments today.
Wow. It's really,
I love reading that stuff.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's interesting. And when you mentioned the poet T.S. Eliot and time, give us those lines again from T.S. Eliot.
Those 3 lines: time past, time present, time future. It's the same.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it's funny. I remembered one word that means a lot to me. I know a lot of friends who are either entrepreneurs or coaches and things like that. And I know that many women use this word and, standing up for equal pay and overcoming, oppression and so on. It's resilience. Do you think that America is and still is a resilient culture? And, if we're heading into some challenges right now, and some people say there are challenges ahead, we will have that resilience, that it seems like T.S. Eliot captured so beautifully in that poem.
Yes, that's part of our culture. Woke at its best means stand up when you see or experience discrimination or racism. That's correct. And MAGA says, essentially, people don't even quite grasp it, but the Constitution is a 1-page document. Let's just live by that and stop interpreting it to mean whatever we want it to mean. That's the split in this country, even though people aren't quite saying it, but that's what it really is. Yeah, so we're resilient. Anybody who stands up and protests, that's a good sign. People didn't stand up and protest before World War II in Germany or in Japan or almost anywhere.
And I remember a few weeks or months ago, you let slip a little bit of a secret. I don't know if people know this, but that you've actually been known to write a check to the ACLU. Is that true?
Yeah, the ACLU, I'm a member. I'm a card-carrying member. I like to say that. But the ACLU that I joined is not the same as it is today. And the leaders, the founders of the ACLU themselves complain. They themselves have quit. It's become a progressive organization during Trump's time with one goal: get that man out of office.
I see.
They would never defend free speech unqualified. That's what it was about.
Yeah.
The ACLU would defend the Nazis. They would defend the Ku Klux Klan, and the reasoning was correct. Because if we pick and choose who we defend, whatever reasons we give for not defending somebody is going to be used against us when we're defending something that we do believe in. ACLU doesn't believe in the Ku Klux Klan or the Nazis, but they have a right to speak. So I would support them because they were certainly not perfect, but anybody who's got something right deserves support. Sometimes they'll support the Sierra Club. Sometimes they're really right. They're mostly wrong, but sometimes they're right. And the ACLU used to be right about that. And now they're not right about that. But I keep my membership, so when I get on a podcast like this, I can say it. I'm a card-carrying member of the ACLU.
Well, maybe they'll return to their roots. Those are all qualities to think about, that freedom of speech and resilience and so on. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think we better wrap it up for the day, but thank you so much for today. And I just want to remind our viewers and listeners to be sure to check out David's website, where you can find copies of his books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative, available for purchase. You can also purchase them through Amazon.com, of course. And any closing words, David?
My books are rich in material with classical examples of everything we're talking about. And it makes everything come together. And they're rich in personal insights that I have from so much experience. I have an insight into Andrew Carnegie that is worth the book itself.
I would agree with that.
All right.
Okay, well, enjoyed it. Look forward to the next time. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here.